Well, spring has sprung. And although here in Florida, the seasonal change is less obvious than it is up north, we still experience new life springing up all around us. There's just something about seeing things grow, seeing them sprout up from seemingly nothing at all, that's very magical. Spring is a time for planting. So here, as promised, is a gardening tip. The best way to garden is to put on a wide-brimmed straw hat and some old clothes, and with a hoe in one hand and a cold drink in the other, tell someone else where to dig. Now, before anything in life can come to be, seeds must be planted. You and I are planting seeds every day, whether we realize it or not. Jesus spoke frequently about seeds and planting and harvesting, and farming was a useful metaphor for life in his day because for most of human history, a great percentage of the population were farmers. When our country was founded, about 90% of our citizens were farmers. By 1900, that percentage had dropped to about 40%, and today, about 1% of our population feeds the other 99%. One of Jesus's most famous lessons was the parable of the sower. You may have heard it. A farmer went out to sow, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 30, 60, or 100 times what was sown. Now, the people who heard that story would have related to it. Most would have had experience with each of these scenarios. And Jesus took these common occurrences and drew some life lessons from them. And so he explained his meaning. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom, and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in the heart. This is the seed sown along the path. Well, the message of the kingdom was the gospel, a word which means good news. The good news that the kingdom of God is within us, and therefore our good is always available to us. And the fact that the kingdom is within us means that we have dominion over ourselves. We are the ruling authority. The power lives within us. But when we're ignorant of the power that we possess, the evil one snatches our good away before we can enjoy it. What or who is the evil one? It's my negativity. I am the only devil I'll ever meet. So the seed sown along the path may get trampled underneath, and the traffic of everyday life stifles its potential. So back to the story. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word at once and receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes, they quickly fall away. And this happens all too often. We discover the truth about life and our place in it. We get all excited, and maybe we have a wonderful demonstration or two, but then we hit a roadblock and we throw up our hands and say, I guess it was too good to be true. Well, some hear the word, but they only accept it on a superficial level. They never really get around to practicing what they say they believe. So if the times are good, they're all right. But when trouble comes, they fall apart. They don't realize that they've already heard their answer, the solution to their problem, but they have failed to act on that knowledge. At the Center for Spiritual Living, Florida Gulf Coast, where I served as senior minister for 15 years, we had a person who attended regularly for about a year, and she got all enthused about our philosophy. She had a relative who was doing hard time in a federal institution after being convicted of a heinous crime, and his attorneys managed to get him a new trial. So she requested prayers that he be acquitted. At the end of his second trial, the jury unanimously upheld his conviction. And the woman then sent me a letter saying that she had never come back to the center because it was obvious that what we teach is a fraud. Her initial enthusiasm for the truth couldn't withstand an adverse situation because she had no roots. And we get our spiritual roots by studying and by learning from what we've studied and by practicing what we've learned. Without roots, at the best, will be a flash in the pan. The story of the seeds continues. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life choke the word, making it unfruitful. And we'll be exploring this aggravating phenomenon in a couple of weeks. For now, let's just acknowledge that thorns and weeds can spring up and discourage us from tending our gardens. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. And this is the one that produces a crop, yielding 30, 60, or 100 times what was sown. It's here that we get to the real point of the story. We reap what we sow. We harvest what we plant. We plant a little seed and we get a mighty tree. We sow the wind and we reap the whirlwind. So who are you and what do you want to become? What kind of seeds or thoughts are you planting? Where will you plant your seeds? What's the condition of the soil? Has it been plowed or tilled? How's the weather? Your mental environment, your predominant mood, how's that going to affect the growth of your seeds? And when should you plant your seeds? And why are you planting them? What's your ultimate purpose? All these questions need to be answered if you're going to grow seeds of greatness. And when you plant your seeds, do you have faith that they'll grow? The farmer knows that if he plants the seeds, the right seeds at the right time, in the right soil, and then does his best to water and weed, the seeds will take root and grow. That's faith. Now, the amazing thing about a seed is that it has within it an energy that can produce a huge plant. And as small as a seed is, it has the potential of a giant within. For example, take a look at this. This is an apple seed. It's only about 1/8 of an inch tall, and yet it has the potential of developing into a tree that's 20 feet tall. A tree which over its lifetime can produce thousands of apples and millions of seeds. Each one of these tiny seeds has the potential of developing into a full-grown apple tree. It's been said that you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the apples in a seed. And so the process repeats itself over and over again. We get to choose what to plant. And if we don't choose, our gardens are taken over by anything, usually weeds, that happens to land there. And Jesus also compared faith to a mustard seed. As tiny as this apple seed is, a mustard seed is only about 1/8 this size. And yet it was said that if we had the faith of a little mustard seed, we could move mountains. The mustard seed, or the mustard plant rather, is the largest garden plant that was around in Jesus's day. It's really a bush, but it grows to the size of a tree, and birds can build nests in its branches. And so, just as from the very tiniest seed a great plant can grow, from a very tiny amount of faith, a mountain can be moved. Occasionally, someone says to me, I wish I had more faith. You may have said that. I've probably said it too. But I don't think any of us needs more faith. I think we have all the faith we need. We're just putting our faith in the wrong things. For example, you'll often hear people say that faith is the opposite of fear. I don't think that's correct. Fear really is a form of faith. It's faith that's misplaced, a belief in and an expectation of whatever it is that we don't want. So you don't need more faith. You just need to focus your faith on what you want instead of on what you fear. There's power in a seed because a seed can grow. Think of a tiny blade of grass that can find a minute crack in your sidewalk and push upward toward the sun. With time, the grass, which is very delicate when it first appears, can cause a great crack in the very solid, very heavy, very rigid concrete. Well, as children of God, we have seeds of greatness embedded within us. All we need to do to awaken our inner giant is to identify and nurture those seeds, provide them with the right amount of light, water, and properly prepared soil. Although planting our seeds is up to us, we can all help each other with the nurturing process. You may never know how much your love and attention may help others nurture their seeds of greatness. You've heard of the piano man, Billy Joel, but did you ever ask yourself who was his piano teacher? Well, his name was Ben Goldman. He was a longtime public school music teacher, and Ben was semi-retired when I met him. He was the conductor of an all-volunteer symphony orchestra made up mostly of retired music teachers and college music majors. I once had the privilege of performing as a guest soloist with that orchestra. And his prize student was Billy Joel. He was very proud of the fact that he had played a role in that amazing musical success story. The musical talent was already in Billy Joel as a potential, and Ben Goldman helped him develop it. Have you ever heard of Greg Collins? He was another one of Ben's music students. He also had a lot of potential, but he never developed into a great musician. Why? He didn't do the work. It's up to each of us to look after the seeds within us. Others can help, but they can't do all the work for us. The greatest seed imaginable won't guarantee a healthy, productive plant. God has packed tremendous potential into every seed, but it's up to us to take care of it, to properly nurture it. The Soviet Union used to have a lesson in every public school to prove that God doesn't exist. They would start with two identical plants, and they would water one of them, make sure it got enough light, give it plant food, and so on. And the other plant received no water, no plant food, and not enough light. Instead, the school children were told that God would look after it. Well, of course, in a couple of weeks, the plant they took care of was thriving, and the plant that was left to God was dying. You see, the teacher would say, the plant looked after by the state is healthy. The plant looked after by God is dying. That's because there is no God. I read about a man who bought an old rundown farm, and he spent a couple of years working hard, turning it into a thriving enterprise. And one day, a new minister came to town to become the pastor of the local church, and he went from house to house, visiting all the locals. And when he got to this man's farm, he commented on how beautiful it was. God has certainly done a tremendous job with this old farm. And the farmer replied, yeah, well, you should have seen this place when God was running it by himself. Well, we are divinely endowed with seeds of greatness in the form of talent and aptitude. But a seed on its own cannot grow to become a mighty tree unless it's nurtured with the right care. We've got to do the work. It's been said that gardening requires a lot of water, most of it in the form of perspiration. In many cases, seeds are hidden from view. For every seed you can see, there are trillions of seeds you can't. Likewise, the talent in you is hidden, unrecognized until you identify it. But to identify it is not enough. The ability to develop it is the key to realizing the greatness within. Every one of us has far more seeds within than we'll ever have time to develop. Nature is funny that way. It always produces an extravagance of life. Like those apple seeds, many of them will never sprout and produce an apple tree. So nature creates many more seeds than are necessary. Perhaps the most important thing a farmer does is prepare the soil, what we refer to as the creative medium. It's been said that we can't make it rain, but we can see to it that the rain falls on prepared soil. If the soil is packed too tightly, the rain tends to run off instead of soaking into the ground. The solution is to till the soil, to loosen it up, to let the water in, to let the air in. And likewise, when we are wound up too tightly, spirit has a difficult time getting through to us. When we have a closed mind, or what the Bible refers to as a hard heart, it's difficult for the living water to refresh us. We need to loosen up. And of course, if the soil is full of weeds, it chokes out new growth. And a very important part of preparing the soil is fertilizer. It enriches the soil and provides nutrients for the plant's growth. The richer the soil, the healthier the plant. We can enrich the soil of our spiritual lives in many ways. By reading spiritual books and magazines that help us keep our focus on matters of the heart and soul, by praying and spending time in silence and meditation, by attending this center, by having spiritual discussions with friends and family, by taking classes. And the events of our lives that we don't like can also be fertilizer that helps us grow. There's a story about President Harry Truman, who, when asked by a reporter what he'd been doing that day, replied, I spent the morning spreading manure on the rose bushes. And some society ladies were appalled, and they approached Bess Truman. Oh, Mrs. Truman, couldn't you prevail on your husband to save fertilizer? And Bess replied, ladies, if you only knew how long it took me to get him to say manure. Well, the events of our lives that we may refer to by impolite names can be some of our best stimulants for growth. Using the icky stuff to promote growth is dramatic proof that all things work together for the good of those who love God. So we prepare the soil, we plant the seed, we tend to it, and we await the harvest. There's one ultimate aim of sowing a seed, and that is for it to bear fruit. But before that can happen, other parts of the plant, such as the roots, the stem, the leaves, the buds, and the branches, must grow and establish themselves. And likewise, during our growth and development, we have to engage in consistent thoughts and practices to serve as the foundation for our ultimate manifestation. Too often, we give up on the plant before it's ready to produce fruit. Ernest Holmes used to say that it's up to us to plant the seed and to nurture the seed, but that it's up to God to take care of the growth. The point of the parable of the mustard seed is that it doesn't take great faith to produce great results, because the results don't depend on us. They depend on God. We need to develop the faith of that little mustard seed, the faith that what we planted and cared for will, in perfect right time, grow into the result we desire. There's a story of a woman who was known for her simple faith and her great calmness in the midst of life's trials. And another woman, hearing of her, said, I must go and see that woman and learn the secret of her calm, happy life. So she went and asked, Are you the woman with great faith? Oh, no, the woman answered. I'm not the woman of great faith, but I am a woman with a little faith in a great God. Ernest Holmes pointed out that it's no good to plant the seed and then dig it up every day to see what's happening. Let the roots and the stem and the branches and the leaves and the buds do their thing, knowing that they are necessary to the process. There's a type of bamboo that grows very, very slowly. So slowly that for a long time, it's only growing underground. You can see no evidence of a plant at all. And eventually a tiny sprout emerges from the earth. But even then, its growth continues very, very slowly. And it goes on that way for what seems like forever. And then suddenly, almost overnight, it grows to 30 or 40 feet tall. When nothing seemed to be happening, the bamboo plant was growing a root system that could support a 40-foot plant. What looked like inactivity was really a process. And we have a process as well. And what is that process? There's 3 steps. First, recognize that God is our source. There's only one source. That source is inexhaustible and it's forever available. Spirit may use many ways and means to meet our needs: a job, gifts, doctors, friends, family. But Spirit alone is the source, a source that cannot fail, cannot be depleted, and is always offering itself to us. And second, give first so that you may receive. Jesus said, Give, and it shall be given unto you. And he was talking about giving in the deepest, most complete sense of that word, giving ourselves to life, to our source, to each other, to our world. And this includes anything that we can give: love, time, patience, forgiveness, money, prayer, whatever we have. Our giving reflects our trust in God as well as our gratitude. And it links us to that inexhaustible source that supplies our every need. There's absolutely no way that we can give without receiving something back. And it comes back multiplied. And then third, expect results. Jesus also said, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them. The moment we expect something, the moment we do our part and plant our seed of faith, we should know that our answer is on its way. What this really amounts to is giving Spirit something to work with. No matter how little you think you have, plant it in joy and faith, knowing in your heart that you're sowing seeds and that you will reap results. What does a farmer do when he has a barren field that's producing no income? He doesn't complain about it. He just goes out and starts working the soil and planting the seeds, because nothing is going to happen until he does. He can complain all he wants. He can pray all he wants, but that's not going to get him anywhere unless he plants some seeds. And sometimes we get the idea that we're waiting on God. You think you're waiting on God for that new relationship. You're waiting on God for a financial blessing. You're waiting on God for a healing. Meanwhile, God is saying, I'm waiting on you. I'm waiting on you to plant a seed. Why does God require us to plant a seed? Because planting is an act of faith. You take what you've got and you give it away. You give it to the creative medium. You give it to the soil. That takes an act of faith, and faith is always rewarded. That's the principle of sowing and reaping. Whenever you have a need, plant a seed. Whatever it is that you need, more health, more money, more support, more wisdom, more love, whatever you need, plant a seed. If you need more love, give more love to everyone you meet. If you need more wisdom, share what wisdom you have with others. Give yourself away. It may not make much sense to you to give away that which you need more of, but that's exactly the kind of attitude that keeps the flow of good circulating in your life. And that's exactly what will produce fruit in your life. When you have a need, don't gripe about it. Don't wish about it. When you have a need, plant a seed. And every time you plant a seed, a thought, and dwell on that thought with faith and belief, the seed takes root. And the more actively you think about a thought, the more it becomes a belief. And the more you believe and have faith in your thoughts, seeds, the more they begin showing up as growth in your life. We sow seeds every day. We sow seeds physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Every seed that we sow brings its own harvest, either for good or for ill. When we do something kind for others, such as giving them a gift, we're sowing seeds of blessings and joy. When we say a kind word, we're sowing seeds of love and affirmation. Everything begins with the seed. We are to sow our seeds with diligence and keep them watered with our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions, so that when our harvest comes, it will be well worth the wait. Focus your thoughts and energy on being the great person that God is creating you to be. Don't believe those who preach lack and limitation, fear, anger, separation from God. If you believe that negative stuff and focus on it long enough, it will become your reality and your truth. Choose to focus on abundance and prosperity, faith and love, and union with God. And then, and only then, will you be planting seeds of greatness. Then, and only then, will you be reaping a harvest of greatness. Then, and only then, will you be living the life you are meant to live. Faith is a tiny seed planted deep within the soul. Nourished by a trust in God, the seed begins to grow. Quietly it opens, like a fragrant blooming flower. Roots reach out to find a home, enriched by God's great power. And so it is.